a soldier, an airman, and a Marine walk into a room. This show is the punchline. My name is Ryan Smeltz, and you're watching Veteran Talk Show.
So like a few weeks ago, we were talking about a Gulf War guy, and it reminded me of, so I had a chef instructor who was a Gulf War veteran, and then left. He was a helo pilot, and then ended up being like the chef at like the Pentagon and shit. Like knew his shit. Like he was a great dude. So, but he was also a Marine in the Gulf War as a pilot. And he would be like, I was in the Gulf War, you know, the one that we won. And I would be like, oh, you won that one, huh? Is that why I had to go back? Is that why I was there? So we would bust each other's balls about it. Like, it was funny because there was this girl who was in that lab that I had with him, and she was from the Navy, and we would rip on each other, and then she would start in, and then we would just both be like, really, Navy, you're trying to come to the game? Like, you want to ride this cowboy? Like, so that's my Gulf War veteran. He and I used to just bust each other's balls, and he was one of my instructors. So it was kind of weird being a student with the teacher, and he's busting my balls about, you know, being a grunt and shit, and I'd bust his balls about being a Pogue pilot. Yeah, he's a good dude.
You see that book on the floor right there on the TV?
Yeah, something 2000.
What is that, like 4 inches thick?
Yeah.
Plus there's another one. I think it's up under.
I can't even see what it says because most of the table is.
So that and the other one are both on Microsoft Access. Because primarily the problem that I'm having is like with inventory. So in processing and sending out orders, I can fix with one piece of software I know about, but they won't talk to me unless I'm at like 100 orders per day.
Yeah.
Which is bullshit because I've used them before in a warehouse 2 years ago, and that warehouse wasn't at 100 orders per day. It was like 20, maybe 100 on Mondays when the weekend had passed. But the only reason I mention all that is because years ago I was thinking of writing my own software because I was having problems, and so I was like, all right, well, come to find out, I'm also learning the Google Sheet aspect of it, but this guy Gordon teaches first responders how to interact with veterans, specifically dealing with situations. But he also collects Legos. And so he has some sort of degree that deals with computers, because he has like a computer that he took of mine. He recovered the data, and then he has an entire library of that shit, but he also uses his computer degree and his knowledge and experience to build a database that coincides with his Legos. So he'll buy a group of Legos or whatever. He'll buy it off the internet, shows up, and then he has to separate them and categorize and whatnot. Keeps his hands busy, and then
all that
he built a database on Microsoft Access, and he's cataloging all of them.
Yeah, when you're in a warehouse tracking, this is something I know a lot about. If you don't have a system that does it automatically, the best way to do it, in my opinion, is through an Excel spreadsheet.
Yep.
Here's everything that I have. Here's the quantity. And then at the end of the day, sales made, quantity depleted, you have to change those numbers.
Yep.
And then you just build a running tally of that.
So the issue that I've dealt with for the past 3 or 4 years has been the automation of that.
Yeah.
And Access is going to allow me to automate it. Not just automate it, but also host it on my website so that my clients can basically go in and say, okay, we're sending you this. And then when I receive it, I scan it. And so when I scan it, it verifies. It says, okay, you were sent this, you were sent X number of quantity.
You got to,
so
stuff like that though, you've got to pay for. That's
sure.
part of your overhead. I mean, if you're doing it essentially what I would call paper to pallet, you literally have to keep all your orders and then manually go in and say, I had 10 of this, I sold 3, and you just go through and just have a formula set up and say, okay, now I have 7.
Yeah. So through
inventory is the hardest thing to keep track of manually in warehousing, I think.
And that's why I want to automate it. So with Access,
actually, even automated inventory is still a very hard thing. I mean, it's something you've got to monitor. Every day. Every minute of every day. I mean, I worked at a place that had 18,000 plus SKUs in one warehouse.
That's a lot of SKUs.
That's a lot of SKUs. And you have variances and you have things but you've got to have a staff that goes out and their sole focus is A, daily checking of the inventory. And then B, investigating big variances and saying, okay, because you're going to lose things in your inventory. And that comes from a whole process. Like you've got to have processes in place for shipping, for receiving, for all of these different things. And if you're going into warehousing, any type of warehousing, and you think, oh, it's going to be easy, there are different, you have to keep different parts of the machine running. If one breaks down, the entire machine breaks down. Just like in a car, right? A belt snaps, the whole engine shuts down. It's the same thing for warehousing. So you've got to understand what your inventory is, what you're selling, how much you have, how much you've sold, what's coming in versus what's going out. I know a lot about warehousing. So it's been my career for a while now. 10 years almost.
So what kind of software did you guys use?
Warehouse management system, WMS.
Yeah, but which one?
Well, I've used Manhattan. That was the first one, was Manhattan WMS. And there are different software companies that are specific for different industries. So like, I would assume AWS, which is Amazon, has some form of WMS that it's working through.
So AWS is the API, which grants access to your OMS and your WMS.
Yeah, but for their actual warehousing facilities, I'm sure they have a WMS system. So you pretty much have WMS or SAP. Those are the two big ones in warehousing. Those are the two big software run programs.
Yeah,
and SAP is, from what I've never worked with it, but from what I've heard horror stories about SAP.
So WMS is so AWS is Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
That's an API which grants access to their information. So if you sell FBA, you don't have to worry about it. But if you sell merchant fulfilled, so what I do in selling those books and all that inventory is I provide the same service that Amazon provides to its sellers, except instead of FBA, which is fulfillment by Amazon, it's fulfillment by merchant, theoretically speaking. And so the software that I use, the WMS and the OMS, obviously is up to me.
Right.
But what I used in Durham a few years ago, I'm not going to name drop there because it doesn't seem to be working now since they want me to have a certain order volume. But it connects through API to the sales channel. And then when the sale is made, so it's it's more focused on e-commerce. So as opposed to like a distributor or a retail environment, when a sale is made on Walmart or Sears or Amazon or eBay, then it dings that system, which is a warehouse management system. It's a WMS. But once that sale comes in, you go in the morning at 8 o'clock, you print off the packing slips, you go pick the orders, you pack them, you ship them, you know. So it's the same as what you're talking about. The difference is in the e-commerce space, anybody who knows how to make software has made one.
Yeah.
And so
there's a lot of different software out there. I mean, I've worked for...
The biggest hiccup that I'm dealing with is that I want to be able to scan it in and scan it out. And the only difference is that scan is an enter function. So it's the same as pressing the enter key on a keyboard, but it's a scanner. And so in order to do that, I have plenty of softwares that'll do it, but I don't want to pay $30 per month per software to have 3, 4, 5, 6 different softwares. And so what I love about the guy that keeps Legos is he has a really firm understanding of access, and I can host that on my website. So he gave me homework.
Yeah. I mean, but you still have to go through. So the problem with what you're doing, and you and I have discussed this outside the podcast, anyone who's listening to this at this point is going to be like, you guys are fucking boring the shit out of me.
Right.
Because we're going to nerd out here for a second. But the problem you have is SKUs.
No.
You don't have in your warehouse, and you can't because of how your business is that you can't have each individual book as a SKU number, right? So so you can have the same book.
What you're saying applies to every used book business.
Well, probably. I would assume so.
You can't have 158 in Wake Forest. There's Mike's used books in Cary.
Yeah, but they don't have. So let's say you have like To Kill a Mockingbird. You have 8 copies of that. That's not one SKU number. Whereas in what I'm used to, like the liquor world, whereas if I have a case of Woodford Reserve, that is under one SKU number, and I just have
that's the same
1,000 cases of that shit.
That's the same with any industry where the product is new. And that's the issue that we deal with when it comes to Shopify channels. Because when you go to cross-post through channels, if it's used, it doesn't communicate that condition with the other channels. Whereas if you were to take liquor, the Woodford Reserve, besides the fact that I'm pretty sure you can't do that through Shopify, you can broadcast that across channels because the condition is only new.
Yep.
So that's the issue that you deal with. And that's the issue that you deal with. You know, the number one thing I've done successfully, especially since, you know, you and I made that decision at the beginning of the year, is going hard on the Amazon aspect, because I have a piece of software that I pay for that categorizes it. So all I have to do is scan the book. So the ISBN determines profitability. Those 3 bins that we started with to work on Amazon, I've been cycling through consistently.
Yeah.
And so what's great about that is we picked up the order volume and we've increased the revenue.
Yeah, but your downside is you're taking in so much inventory.
Yep.
I mean, when I first came into that, into your place, there was 300-400 boxes in there of books, and I would go through 10 boxes, 15 boxes, and build out of, let's say, a few thousand books. I'd be able to build one based on what your profit margin was that you set. Was able to really only build one box for Amazon, and then the rest was all done through your personal sales channel, not through Amazon, but through. And that's where the problem was that I saw was like, you know, I'd spend 4 or 5 hours taking pictures of all that shit, and, doing all the labels for it. And then they wouldn't get posted anywhere.
Yeah.
They would just kind of like you and I would sit there and be like, dude, I've made almost 50 boxes of books and they're nowhere. They are not in any type of inventory. I mean, we physically have them.
I gotta say, like, your experience brought to the table.
A lot of experience, motherfuckers.
I mean, the value. So, like, sitting down full time, I'm sure that I would have recognized certain holes.
Yeah.
And been like, hey, what the fuck, But just, it was really refreshing to be able to take you and say, hey, here's the problem I'm having. And you were like, okay, X, Y, and Z. All right, cool. Hey, Ryan, your shit's fucked up, and this is where the hole is. It was really nice. So I think, if anything, it's given me, because I've obviously shifted gears, I've cut costs, and I've increased revenue, at least enough to make it more of a progressive,
Yeah.
My revenue is increasing each month because I found what works and I'm applying it. But to have someone like you come in, so when I get to the point where I'm like, okay, like today I ran through a test last night, I ran through a test today. It's data entry. I fucking hate it. But yesterday I did data entry. It basically has to do with the descriptions, the weights, and the pricing of the books. But if I don't do it, it's not going to be accurate. So I did it. Yesterday I did 40 some odd inside of an hour. Today I did close to 80. So my goal was 8. I think I did 70. My goal was 80. But I did 70 inside of an hour. So I have the process. I have the automation set up on the back end and spreadsheets like you talked about just a second ago. And what that showed me is that with those automations, I can do the same process. I can increase my efficiency, and then when I get to the point where my sales are moving, so it's profitable, and I go to hire someone to operate, because right now we're in talks of warehousing space. That's up in the air. There's like 3 or 4 different people involved. You're talking small. Could be like 10,000 square feet,
Well, here's what you got to think about when you think about warehousing and warehousing space. If it's just open warehousing for what you need, you also need to think about racking, because you can't just park shit on a floor and put it onto a pallet. Otherwise, you're going to kill yourself trying to pull stuff.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about warehousing, you need to, and racking is expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, even something simple of just going to, buy something and build it yourself and fabricate it yourself, it's very expensive. Racking is very expensive. I mean, you're talking steel.
Yeah.
Because it's got to be able to support weight. And when you're thinking about going into warehousing, I mean, that needs to be a cost when you're looking at space. Like, what is it going to take for me to be able to come in and pull this shit quickly? Yeah. Right? Because if I'm just putting shit on a floor in a certain area, I still got to go dig that out if I need to get to the box on the bottom level. If there's 150 boxes on top of it, I've got to move all that shit just to get to one book.
Yeah.
It's going to take me forever.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at warehousing space, that would be my thing, is look at how you're going to rack it and how you're going to be able to get kind of like the shelving that you made in your current space, where you can just go to that box, that one box, pull it out and grab the book that's in that box,
yeah,
and then ship it.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be the efficient thing. That's going to be what allows you to do 300-400 orders in a day.
Yeah.
If you don't have that system in place, or that process in place, you're not going to be able, because the goal is you want to ship 1,000 orders a day with 2 or 3 people, which is doable. You can do that. That is definitely possible. It really is. I mean,
I mean like 1,000 orders a day with 2 or 3 people, and I would.
If you have the system and process in place, I mean, so.
But
I would ship
the biggest difference.
I would ship 20,000 orders in a night.
Yeah.
With what did I have on my night crew?
But
like 20 people.
But you're talking about the alcohol, right? So you're talking direct.
Yeah, but it's still.
Are you still distributor? Are you shipping orders to distributors, or are you shipping orders to customers?
Well, so we were shipping orders to customers.
Customers like who? Like individual consumers?
To licensed retailers.
So licensed retailers, were they inside the state of Louisiana?
Yes, we weren't allowed to cross state lines. So in the liquor world, you're not, if as a distributor, you're not so there's the 3-tier system.
Yeah.
Right? That was set up at the end of Prohibition. You have the manufacturer, the distributor, and the end consumer, or the end seller.
Yeah.
So the manufacturer shipped it. So if the manufacturer is in Kentucky and they are supplying the product, the distributor for each state buys that product, brings it in, and then ships it out to the retailer.
Yeah.
That's the 3-tiered system, right? That was, from what I've was told and what I've researched, that was the idea of keeping the mob out of, because at the end of Prohibition, I mean, the mob was so big into bootlegging that was a way to kind of keep them out. So in the liquor world now, and this is liquor, this is not, beer does not apply here, wine does not apply here, because you can go as a beer distributor and own your own distribution channels. So you can have kind of like a Walmart, like a wheel and spoke distribution channel from manufacturer to the end retailer who's selling it directly to the customer.
Yeah.
Liquor, you can't do that. Liquor, you have to go through that 3-tier system. And I think with anything else, it's like based on what your barrels are. And I'm not real sure, but as a distributor, I wasn't allowed to cross state lines. So I could not be in Louisiana or Colorado and then from there ship directly to a customer in Nebraska or Mississippi. My trucks weren't allowed to leave the border, even if it was quicker. Like I could not take my truck with booze on it and have it cut north and go through like Alabama so you couldn't get to the boot. I had to go all the way around.
Okay.
Because then I was avoiding different taxes and everything.
Wow.
Because each state has its own liquor laws.
Yeah.
So you have the federal liquor laws, which are pretty broad, right? And states can't supersede that, right? It's just like any other law. It's stare decisis, right? Yeah. So federal government makes a law, no state can supersede that law.
Yeah.
Or write a law that finds its way around that, right? The idea being the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Now we're getting into my nerdy law shit. Because I love law. There was a time where I was like, I'm going to be a lawyer. Yeah. I hate the reading. I just hate the fucking reading.
Yeah.
It's so dry. And it's so hard to get through. But I love the argument. I love, I had to take a law class. What was funny was I studied law before going into the Marine Corps, and I wasn't like pre-law. I was studying applied criminology and had to take a lot of law classes, and then dropped out and joined the Marine Corps, went back to college after the Marine Corps and had to take a single law class.
Yeah.
As like an elective. And I can remember arguing with the professor who was a lawyer who had passed the bar in the state of Colorado, and she was mentioning this court case that was going up through the state Supreme Court. And she was, we had our homework assignment was we had to write a paper once on this Supreme Court case, Colorado State Supreme Court, that was getting ready to be heard and what we thought the outcome was going to be. And it was a pot law court case. And I remember presenting it, and I was like, and again, this is an elective, so it wasn't like it was a court, but we debated it in class, and I was like, she was like, I think this law is going to, I think the Supreme Court is going to side with the plaintiff and not with the defendant. And I was like, you're absolutely wrong, because the Colorado State Supreme Court has to side with the federal precedent. It can't supersede it. And she was like, and I told her, I was like, that's just called stare decisis. That's what it is. The federal courts have already ruled on this. So the Colorado State Supreme Court is going to have to rule with what their ruling was. And sure enough, I was right. I was like, fuck you. Yeah, but I love law shit. But yeah, so I don't know where I was with talking about why we got into that, but
I just found it interesting because you made it sound like even if you had a delivery inside the state, you couldn't leave state lines and come back. Regardless of the route.
Nope. Can't do it. Because you have to go through, when you come in, so this is going through a truck stop.
Yeah.
It's called a port of entry.
Yeah.
So you'd have to go through a port of entry, and then they're going to go, what are you hauling? And they're going to see your manifest, because you have to have a manifest and a bill of lading for whatever product you're hauling.
Of course.
If you don't have a federal license in that truck, so our trucks didn't have federal licenses to cross state lines, right? Because there's a tax involved there, right? The people we bought from used huge interstate trucking that paid licenses and paid taxes on what they were, and they built that into the cost that we purchased it for.
Right.
Whereas we aren't building that tax into our bills to the customer. Right. So I'm not building an interstate tax of liquor into a grocery store that is 2 hours away in the same state if I cut through another state. Right. So like if I'm in Charlotte and let's say I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, right? And I need to go to Wilmington. The quickest way is to cut through South Carolina.
Of course.
Right. If I'm hauling liquor, that wouldn't be allowed, because then I'm not paying the interstate tax on the spirit by the gallon to cross that state, because then it gets into this huge chain. And there are going to be lawyers out there that are going to go eat this all to pieces. But from my understanding, that's what it was.
Yeah.
There was a tax issue where I wasn't paying the interstate tax charge to cross state lines. So if I was in Charlotte and had to go to Wilmington, I had to come up 85 into Greensboro and then go down, or try and find a road that was in North Carolina. I was not allowed to go through South Carolina to come back into North Carolina, because I was avoiding paying that interstate tax fee on the spirit. And it's also because every state has their own liquor laws. So like North Carolina, the state owns the inventory. So part of our budget, our stately budget that the legislature comes up with, is purchasing of booze.
Yeah.
So they own the inventory.
Yeah.
So it is a controlled state. That's why when you go and buy liquor, you go to a state-run store, and the people who work there are state employees, because the state owns the inventory.
It's a lot different than Texas, where we had Twin Liquors and
so their laws are a little bit different in the fact that they do have liquor stores, but they're private owned, but there's still some state mandated stuff. And I don't know the exact laws because I never worked in Texas.
Yeah.
But you can't go to like a Walmart and buy liquor. Whereas in New Orleans, you can go and buy liquor pretty much anywhere. Or in Nebraska was that way. Like you walk into a gas station and buy a bottle of liquor like you were buying beer.
Yeah.
In Colorado, when I lived there at the time, you could only have one license per LLC or per business. So like Walmart could have one store that it chose, since Walmart was a huge company, they could choose one store out of that company to sell liquor. right? So you like Target, you could go into the Target on Colorado Boulevard and buy liquor, but you couldn't go to the Target in Colorado Springs and buy liquor because and that's how, because Colorado was like, we want to support local business, and local businesses are going to be the mom and pop liquor stores. And we do not want a chain coming in and owning, or a grocery store coming in and owning and running those people out. Because small business is what drives the economy. Yep. That was kind of their mindset. So they said you couldn't go buy it in a gas station. You couldn't buy it in a grocery store. But if you were a mom and pop, you could have 4 or 5 different LLCs. If you so choose, let's say you have a big family, right? Dad runs one liquor store. Mom runs another liquor store. Johnny runs a third liquor store. You're all pulling your resources together, but you're all different licenses and LLCs.
Yeah. That's crazy.
And that was rare. But that's why you had liquor stores.
Yeah. I feel like in Louisiana, you could get, when I was stationed at Fort Polk, I feel like you could get liquor inside of Walmart.
You could get liquor in the grocery stores and at Walmart.
Okay.
You can get them at gas stations if you really wanted to.
Texas,
you couldn't do that.
I think you had to go to a liquor store.
You had to go to a liquor store, but it was a chain liquor store.
But the liquor stores were, Twin Liquors. They were chains. They had liquor, they had beer, they had cheese, they had cigars, they had wine.
Yeah, they were a private business that was their own liquor store, but they had 30 of them in the state of Texas.
Yeah.
So they had these huge, it was, from what I was told, because we had markets in Texas, and I don't know, from what I was told by people who I knew who worked in Texas, was that those people, they were like a sub-distributor for themselves. So they would buy product from my company, and my company would ship it directly to one of their warehouses, and then their warehouses would ship it out to all their stores. Because they had 15, 20 stores across the state.
So what?
That was my understanding. And I may be incredibly wrong about that, but that was my understanding of it.
So what was like your minimum or your smallest order?
Each state was different. I mean, so we had minimum, we calculated, you can go through and calculate what your minimum, we had a minimum delivery fee. So if you surpassed X amount of dollars, and Colorado was different than Louisiana based on what your market looked like, because in Colorado, everything's a lot more spread out. So you have these huge population centers dotted throughout the state, but you would have to drive miles to get there, right? So all of that goes into effect. You have to look at all the things that go into, okay, I've got a DOT Class A or Class B driver that's got to follow regulations. So if he has a 6-hour working day plus a 6-hour drive, that's a 12-hour day. And that's one way. He's not going to be able to turn around and drive home. So now I've got to find a place for him to stay, either at a hotel or on the side of the road, right? If I don't have a sleeper. So I've got to pay for him to stay in a hotel, and then I've got to pay for his food, and then you've got to work. So all of those costs kind of start. And so you start to say, okay, my minimum delivery fee average. And then you go into like taxes. What is the state tax on a gallon of spirits? And you can break that down and say, okay, a 750 milliliter is 10 cents per gallon, or 10 cents per bottle, or 3 cents, or whatever it is. So 175 is X amount of cents, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because you're getting so much of a gallon out of that bottle.
Yeah.
And then you can say, okay, this is what it is. So now I've got to pay that tax. I have to pay it. So I'm going to pass that on to the people who are buying it, and they're going to pass it on to their customers. So there are just different things. In some states you had no minimum delivery fees. In others you would have 300.
Yeah.
And some states, what you would do is you'd have, like in Colorado, we would say, okay, I'm going to be in this area on this day of the week, on this week of the month. So like if it's a far out area, you know, I may be there once every other week because it's just out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want me to deliver something outside of that one day, you have to pay an X amount of fee because you've got to cover the cost for me to get there. And a lot of businesses be like, I'm just going to wait for you to go. And and salespeople would go in and be like, I'm going to help manage your inventory so that you can get carried through those times. So it all depended on the state, it all depended on the market, it all depended on, just different variables.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had minimum delivery fees. In one state I worked, I think the minimum delivery fee was just to open the door of the truck. To get the truck from my warehouse to any place in that state and open that door cost me $23 flat out on average.
Yeah.
So that was the cost. So if I spent more than $23 to get there, that cost went up. And if you didn't spend enough money, I was losing money. You would be in our eyes, you'd be in the red or in the black. So we were losing money on that account.
Sure. So,
and you'd have to go, and I'm not going to go through trade secrets of how you calculate all that stuff, but there's different ways to calculate it.
If I'm a retailer and I order a pallet of liquor,
you're going to make some bank. And it also depends on what the state allows. So some states will offer deals where you can buy 10 cases and get 5 free. So you can actually get 15 cases and only pay for 10 of them.
In all states?
No, in certain states. It depends on the different state.
Okay.
Or you could buy a couple of cases and then get different bottles for free. I mean, there were certain things, like some states would be like, you can't get any free booze no matter what. Like, we don't allow deals. Some states would be like, if you offer a deal to a $1 billion grocery chain, you've got to offer that same deal to mom and dad liquor store.
Yeah.
It just all depends on the state. Every state has different liquor laws.
Yeah.
Within itself. So whatever market you're in, you have to kind of adapt to whatever that is. And it's kind of, people don't think about that. People think, oh, I'm from Colorado, I'm going to go to North Carolina and think that I can just go into a liquor store and buy it. Well, yeah, you can, but the liquor stores here are run by the state. And on Sundays, you can't go in at all because those fucking things are closed down.
No.
And you're not going to get the variety. And this is the biggest thing. I've read articles, and there was this one motherfucker who was quoted in an article, and this pissed me off when I read it, because my mom was trying to convince me, this is before I moved home, was trying to convince me to move home. And it's like, oh, might change the liquor laws here. And then she sent me this article in the News and Observer, and they interviewed this dude. And this dude was like, well, if we privatize liquor, it's not going to change the amount of variety that we have. And I'm like, you're fucking full of shit. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Because suppliers or people who the private liquor companies are buying from are looking at who is spending what money and where. And if I've got something that's comes out once every 10 years or once every 5 years, I'm going to send that shit to the state that's spending 150% more on my company than another state. And I'm going to look at it and go, yeah, okay, Arkansas, you average $20,000 a year with me, but California averages $150 million. Yeah, they're going to get my high valued shit before you are.
Yep.
You'll get it, but you won't get as much as they will. People don't understand that. And he was like, oh, and I was like, no, that's bullshit. It's bullshit. It's all based at the supplier level, and the supplier is going to look and go, where am I going to make the most bang for my buck?
Yeah.
And I was just like, this motherfucker. We have in this article, this whole article is about this whole thing. They have like a 400,000 square foot warehouse that the state pays for. Your tax dollars as a member of North Carolina, your state taxes pay for, it sits empty because they can't keep it filled with booze.
No.
And it's why when you go into an ABC liquor store, you don't have a variety of, like, here people are like, oh, I can't get Buffalo Trace on average.
Yeah.
Like, it's rare that I can get a Buffalo Trace. Never had that problem in Louisiana or in Colorado. Never had that problem. Buffalo Trace is very limited on how they release it, but in like Kentucky, Colorado, Louisiana, where those guys are spending on that portfolio, the company that owns it is going to go, well, I'm going to make sure that they can get it more than this other state because that other state just isn't spending the money on me. And if I try and reserve my limited release on this, I'm not going to make as much money going there.
Right.
Which they're allowed to do. That's not illegal. That's not wrong. That's not a monopoly. They're just kind of weighing the variables of what they have and how much they have. And they're trying to maximize a profit, which is what every business does. And so that's why in North Carolina, finding Blantons in this state is next to impossible.
Yeah.
And I could go in other states and buy Blantons like it was like every week if I really wanted to. It was expensive.
Yeah.
But like it wasn't ever like, oh, I can't fucking find it. Nope, this one liquor store has it and I can go there and get it.
No. That makes me want to ask a question about
North Carolina needs to change their liquor laws? Yes, they absolutely do. Fucking privatize that shit. You get it.
Yes.
It's a whole nother thing. North Carolina, whole nother fucking thing.
That's a whole separate topic.
It just pisses me off.
The question I have.
I get why North Carolina doesn't want to because there's a lot of rural areas.
Tito's.
Yeah.
Tito's vodka. And the reason I ask is because in Texas, because Tito's comes from Austin, I've gotten Tito's vodka like a $7.50 for pennies on the dollar.
Here it's more expensive?
Very much so.
Yeah. Taxes, you're looking at different things. I mean, that's just what it costs to ship it here.
So that's just...
And I don't know who Tito's belongs to. I think Tito's, because they belong to a portfolio. So there are different portfolios, right? So like Beam Suntory is the company that owns like Jim Beam. They own Knob Creek. They own just a different list of spirits. Now, those spirits are manufactured, but once they get brought in, I think once they get brought into a portfolio, every distillery that's in that portfolio can make those spirits.
Okay.
And follow the colas.
Yeah.
Which is a whole nother thing. I'm nerding out on my liquor knowledge. But yeah, and again, that comes from, so like here in North Carolina, I'm going back to like Tito's.
Yeah.
That a lot of that comes from what does it cost to ship it here and what does the state make the taxes on that spirit? Because there's a federal tax that has to be paid for at the manufacturer level, but in order to sell it here in the state, there's a state tax that you've got to pay. And for us, that state tax covers state employees. And for rural counties, I get why North Carolina is like so hesitant to do it. They're because the rural counties for a lot of areas in North Carolina, the only state jobs that some of those counties have are ABC stores.
No.
No, go set up business somewhere else, set up another state business there. You'd make more money privatizing liquor because you'd be able to tax the shit out of it from a supplier level and a distribution level, and then be able to not have to pay an overhead for employees and warehousing. All of that's done through a private company. So it's just a revenue stream where you're not losing fucking money. And then you can take that revenue stream and put it where you want to. Education, criminal law and justice, wherever you want to fucking do it in your state. North Carolina's fucking stupid when it comes to that shit. But your big companies, they don't necessarily want to compete with the smaller craft distilleries. So they're not necessarily invested, and so they pay politicians to make sure that doesn't go away. Because your Beam Suntories and your Brown Formans, they don't necessarily want to compete with the craft liquor movement. Because it's big. It's just like beer. The craft beer movement is huge. It's overtaking Anheuser-Busch or InBev. Yeah. And I mean, it's eating a big chunk of their profit.
Yeah.
Because it's such a big thing. Craft liquor is the same way.
I support the craft beer.
Craft alcohol, craft spirits are great.
Craft liquor, I guess I didn't really know was a thing.
It is. I worked at a distillery in Colorado.
Distilleries I have seen popping up
I don't understand how those guys are making money. I really don't.
Huh?
I don't know how they're making money.
Why?
In the state of North Carolina, I don't know how they're making money.
I mean, I haven't seen that many as far as craft distilleries.
The few that I've seen, I honestly don't know how I don't know how they're holding the profit.
Okay, so
because of the state law. And it's not because they're a bad business or anything. Yeah. It's literally because of the state laws.
Yeah.
I don't know how they are able to compete when they can't get their brand out there unless they're shipping to other states and are mass producing stuff. I really don't know how they're making money. I mean, they have got to be struggling, and that is horrifying for me. Yeah, we're nerding out. I'm nerding out on liquor. People have turned this podcast off a long time ago. Straight up.
I guess, I mean, I see where you're coming from, but so if a person's, because I know a couple of distilleries, so if they start a distillery, like they have to bottle it and sell it. You're saying that the licensing and the regulations are restrictive enough that they're not making a profit? Are they able to sell it on site? Do they have to sell it?
I don't know what the liquor laws are for a manufacturer here.
Okay.
But to distribute it out to a bar. So how you're going to build your brand if you're going into a distillery is not by putting it in a liquor store or a grocery store. It's putting it in a bar. That's how you build your brand. Right? Because they're not bars and restaurants are not going to be buying 50 cases at a time. They're going to be getting bottles and bottles. So if you can put shit on deals, that's where you build your brand. You make your brand popular is through bars and restaurants, mainly bars. Right? Like look at Deep Eddy. Deep Eddy, which is now owned by Heaven Hill, started. And they literally lost, I swear to God, I don't know how they did this without losing money. But I think they started and within 5 years were bought by Heaven Hill for an exorbitant amount of money. But what they did was they basically flooded bars, and especially like college age bars where it was young people. And it was all flavored vodka. And they just said, take our shit for free, bar owners, and make as much money as you can on it because we're trying to get our name out there. We're trying to get our brand out there. And they just flooded it into different areas. And then college kids were like, oh, I love this shit. I want to buy a bottle of it. So then they'd go to their liquor stores, grocery stores, be like, hey, do you have this? No, okay. They'd order it because so many people would ask. And then they start I mean, I think they were open for 5 years before Heaven Hill bought them for, I think, $500 million or close to $500 million. I mean, can you imagine starting a distillery? Let's say that distillery cost them $50 million to start, right? Can you imagine in 5 years' time making $400 million within 4 years by selling your brand to a bigger business that can get you out nationwide? That's insane. That's an insane investment.
I'm okay with it.
And I don't know that's the case. I know that within a few years they were bought out and to a national supplier, and the guys who owned it probably made a fuck ton of money. That's what it is. You look drunk as shit, man.
No, I've only had like 5.
You look pretty ham boned. You're not tits up, but you're close.
No, I mean, I think if we were to choose topics for this show, like I never asked for it, but you're the most loyal person to come. So I actually have you identified as a co-host.
Okay.
Even though
I'm not really a co-host, I'm just kind of here.
Well,
I got nothing better to do. Let's be real. I have no life.
I think it's more along the lines of I don't expect you to be a leg in this, to support this from a standpoint of,
oh, there's a baby.
Baby.
She was asleep. It looked adorable.
Yeah.
My ovaries just exploded. I don't know. Kids freak me out, to be honest with you. Like, I like other people having them. For me,
he said my ovaries just exploded.
I look at kids. Like, kids are great when I can give them back to their parents.
Yeah.
Like, I can be like, I don't have to deal with the crying. This. I don't have to do.
Yeah.
Like, here.
No.
Your kids will be like, your kid was great for about 5 minutes and pretty awesome to play with. Now your kid's crying and I don't know how to make it stop. And the loud noise is really annoying me. So here, take it back. You figure it out. That's how I look at kids.
I agree. I agree. I think Toy agrees.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Back to co-hosting before we were interrupted. That's why we should do this at my house. No one will walk through.
No, I think my favorite thing is that, you just have the conversation and whatever happens. So
yeah, and I go down a deep rabbit hole on liquor and liquor laws, and I mean, I've been talking about that for 15 fucking minutes over here.
I mean, sure, but
people have stopped listening.
I mean, maybe
this is all getting gut out. I'm not worried about it.
I get to edit. So if you ever come to me and you're like, hey, focus on this, but don't focus on this, then I would be like, all right.
Well, I don't
no problem.
I don't talk about like, and I'm not a know-it-all about anything.
But I think it's valuable because like one of the main focuses of this show is veterans who are now doing other things. And I think it's important. I mean, you talked about it early on, your friend who had troubles, I've got friends who either, the guy I talked about, he gave me that book, he gave me the other book, I'm studying it, he deals a lot with Legos, he doesn't get around much, so he still has all his limbs, thank goodness, and I think it's more due to like the normal wear and tear, so to speak, but he is very limited, and I think it's important to offer the knowledge and experience that people like you and I have to people like that, to help them, to support them, to say, hey, you know what? Even if you're in a position where it's like, I feel like we're going nowhere, now they hear you you know, Joe, you have a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge.
Been around the block. I'm old.
Yeah, that other people don't have. So
Old as shit.
I just feel like veterans.
I had a friend of mine who used to be like, it's so great that you're a former Marine, you work in the liquor world. He's like, that is fucking perfect.
Yep.
I was like, yeah, that's what I set out to do. That's the thing about the military, is that it teaches you, or at least it taught me, that I can really do anything I put my mind to. Like I can really go through, like when days are really stressful or long, I can look at myself and take a breath and go, no one's trying to kill me.
Yep.
Right? I'm not going to get hurt right now doing this. Like I just have to just get this thing done, whatever it is I'm doing, and just move on. Like I would drown in work. Like I would work. I mean, I would be at work at between 7 and 8 every morning, and I wouldn't leave until 7 or 8 at night, and that was with a 45-minute drive without traffic. So I mean, I was just running ragged. And then my phone would ring at all hours of the night.
Yeah.
So not every night, but like I'd go to bed, and then all of a sudden at 2:00 in the morning, once a week or twice a week, 3 times a week, you know, my phone would ring with an issue or a problem, and I'd have to get up and go fix it. You know, system's down, or this happened and we don't know what to do. What should we do? And okay, let's figure this out. I'll call it, you know, those types of issues. So I had no social life. I mean, my world revolved around work, which isn't healthy. Nobody should have to do that. But that's just kind of what I dove into, because I was so used to the Marines. I was like, okay, I'm a Marine first and everything else comes second. And anybody who tries to join the Marine Corps, that's what I always tell them. It's like, your life is at the Marine Corps' whim. It doesn't give a fuck what you've got going on. Like, you are a Marine first. Everything else comes second. So if you want to get married, have kids, do all of that shit, bless you. Bless you. Coronavirus? Really? But no, the Marine Corps comes first if you're a Marine. Like, plain and simple. You are a Marine first. Your family comes second. And even though the Marine Corps will tell you, oh, we're a family organization, that's bullshit. It's fucking bullshit. In your contract, doesn't matter, bless you. It doesn't matter what you sign up to do. There is a clause in every enlistment contract that says needs of the Marine Corps. So you can sign up to say, oh, I'm going to go be an airplane mechanic, or photojournalist, or this or that or the other. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. If the Marine Corps doesn't need you there and they need you somewhere else, they're going to place you there. And you're going to get trained to do it. And you're going to have to fucking deal with the bullshit. Now, granted, we're not fighting a war. I don't think that happens that often. But, you know, war breaks out. I knew plenty of guys who signed up for other MOSs and they ended up in the infantry, because that's where the Marine Corps needed them. Yeah. And because you signed on the dotted line and didn't read, and it's in there, if you read it, it's in there. There is a line that says this MOS is based on needs of the Marine Corps. And that's the key term. You are basically saying, yes, I understand. I'm going to go to where the Marines need me. And if that's not the MOS I'm choosing, I just have to fucking deal with it and deal with it.
I guess my question is, because I personally signed up for the Army, and
boo.
Yeah, well, the short version is, I was in high school. I had a Marine recruiter come to the house. He was in his dress uniform. He looked sharp as shit. And we were like, all right, yeah.
Recruiters, well, they used to lie. I don't know if they still do.
I feel like for the most part, recruiters lie, but
I think that's part of being a recruiter.
Yeah. So
they teach you how to be a con man or woman.
Either way.
Or gender fluid, whatever.
My brother-in-law was home on convalescent leave. And he was like, hey, come on down. So I came down to the recruiting stage. I was like, all right, I was like, this is bullshit. I'm going to community college. I have to fucking pay for it. This is fucked up. I worked my ass off all year, and then all my money is gone. So I go down to the recruiting station, and I met a guy who was in the MOS I wanted to be in. I guess that doesn't say much because...
What MOS did you want?
Well, that's the thing. I didn't know what MOS meant. I didn't know what it entailed. So... becoming an MP was like, they were, because I was a Boy Scout, I got my Eagle Scout, I was a police explorer, and then they were like, all right, you can be a cop in the military. I was like, all right, what does that mean? So they were, the fact that he was an MP and I wanted to become an MP, it was arbitrary because it was like, oh, okay, well, you want to be an MP, but I'm an MP.
My recruiter tried to get me to, he was like, you've got to choose 3 jobs, your wish list. 3. And I was like, all right, I want to be infantry, recon, or a sniper. And he's like, well, those are all 03 or infantry based. So you've got to choose something else. And I looked at him, I was like, look, Sergeant, you obviously aren't understanding what I wanted. Like, for me, I was joining the Marines to, like, test myself. And for me, that was joining the infantry. Like, there were 2 wars going on at the time. I was like, this is a test for me. Yeah. So if I can't have those, I don't want to go. Like, there is no other option. And, I think he was trying to bluff me. He's like, well, you'd have to leave in in 3 weeks for boot camp. Would you be ready to go to boot camp in 3 weeks? I was like, absolutely. Let's do this. But like, I knew guys who I joined with who had contracted out. One of my best friends who I met at infantry training at ITB had signed up to be like a combat correspondent or some shit. And he went to ITB and was like, I'm not supposed to be here. And our first sergeant was like, yep, nope, you're not on my list of people who are in the wrong MOS. So you're fucking in the infantry now. Deal with it. And he was just like, congratulations. Okay, I guess I'm in the infantry now. And then he went to infantry training. So yeah, you're gonna fucking go where they want you to go. That's just how it is.
This is the Veteran Talk Show. If you or someone you love is suffering as a victim of sexual harassment, sexual assault, needs help with addiction and recovery, or mental health and well-being, then please go to veterantalkshow.com/resources. This show is hosted, produced, and edited by Ryan Smeltz. Our co-host is Joe Balak, and a guest starring veterans.